Okay, so many people will have seen this kind of slide, the three casts of bees, and down the right-hand side is days, and each one of these U-shaped things is a cell in honeycomb. So in the case of a worker, that's when an egg sitting in the cell on day 1, and day 21, a new worker is born. And what happens is you've got 3 days as an egg. Day 1, the egg's sort of standing up. By day 3, it's laying down. And by day 4, it's a tiny puddle with a little larva in it that you can barely see. And if you were queen rearing, that's the one you want to graft, the really tiny one. About 5.5 days, which I'm going to call 6 as a larva, and then 12 days as a pupa or sealed brood. This whole thing is variable. It varies by the type of bee, and it varies by the temperature. So, but most people go with those numbers. So over here you can see the ratio 3 to 6 to 12. That's what you're going to get. It doubles each time. So if you had 3 eggs, you would expect 6 larvae and 12 pupa, assuming that the queen was laying at a constant rate. And the phrase bias means brood in all stages. So that means you've got eggs, larvae, and pupae in your hive. So these numbers lead to this kind of classic depiction of a brood frame. So you've got your sealed brood, you've got larvae, you've got eggs. Around the edge of the brood is pollen, and up in the corners, honey. And I may not have drawn it exactly right, but you can see you have approximately double the number of eggs as larvae, and then double again the pupa. So that's kind of a standard depiction of what you would expect to see on a frame. It doesn't work like that all the time. In fact, quite often you can get a whole frame of wall-to-wall brood, but this ratio of 3 to 6 to 12 eggs to larvae to pupae, often in the middle of the season with a laying queen, you'll get that ratio across the whole brood nest. So it's not necessarily what you see on one frame, but it's what you see in the whole brood nest. Here's a picture of some newly drawn comb on a plastic frame. And the black plastic makes the eggs show up very well. This is just showing that transition from the brood area. You can see the eggs here into an area of pollen at the edge of the brood. And there's some eggs, but lots of pollen. And then over here, you've got puddles of nectar. So that's transitioning out into the honey section. Also, that's a drone, that big one, sat next to a worker. So you can see the size difference. And also you can see these 2 workers side by side, how they look quite different. This one's entirely dark. This one's half and half. That happens because they have different dads, same mum, which is the queen, but sperm from different drones. And this is one of my frames from late summertime, I think. I use Langstroth frames. So you can see this big chunk of sealed brood there, the pupae. And you probably can't see very clearly, but around the edge, you do have a small amount of open brood, and then honey up in the corners. And there's some cups here, which I just have a quick look in them, but I just leave them alone. Now, what's going to happen is this sealed brood will emerge and become bees, and the open brood around the edge will become sealed, as shown here. So this is a different frame, but it's basically the same idea. And this area here that was sealed brood has now become empty. And in the springtime and early summer, this would be the prime place to look for eggs. If you wanted to quickly see if you had a queen, it's much easier to find eggs than it is to find the queen. And she'll nearly always lay in these newly emerged cells. But in this case, they're empty. So something's afoot. I think the queen had just slackened off on her egg laying because it was getting late in the season. And this is a different sort of frame, which is a stores frame. So a bit of honey at the top and lots of pollen. And these are often found at the edge of the brood nest, or if your colony were to go queenless, they tend to produce quite a lot of frames like this, because the workers are still out foraging for pollen and nectar, but there's less and less brood to feed. So they build up more and more stores of pollen in the brood nest. And that'll all get sorted out when the queen starts laying, when a new queen is produced. But I don't mind if that happens, and I've got a lot of these frames in a brood nest. I can borrow them and give them to other colonies, and particularly cell builders. So they're a good resource. Anyway, the point of all this ratio of 3 to 6 to 12, or 1 to 2 to 4 eggs, larvae, pupae, is that we know what normal looks like. We know what we're expecting to see. So if we see anything different, that's a clue. It helps us to try and figure out what may be going on. In this case here, I'm saying that there's lots of sealed brood in the hive, but no eggs and very few larvae, maybe a few older ones. So what that means is, for whatever reason, the queen has stopped laying. If she had been laying, you'd see eggs and young larvae, and so she's obviously stopped. So this sets off a few alarm bells. Has she died? If she died, you'd expect to see emergency queen cells. Or has she swarmed, in which case you'd see swarm cells. Very often for me, in maybe August, there's still a queen, but she's just having a break. So a lot of people think they've gone queenless towards the end of summer, and quite often, well, yeah, it's quite possible that they're not queenless, that she's just not laying for a while. But nevertheless, the fact that you're not seeing the ratio of 1 to 2 to 4 is giving you a clue that something's afoot. And the opposite is, of course, that you've got no sealed brood at all and plenty of eggs and larvae. So that means that you certainly have got a laying queen, but she's only just started recently. So it could be a newly mated queen, or she could have had a break and started to lay again. I've just put this note here because I think it's important, is that if you first open the hive in the spring and you have a quick look inside and you see no sealed brood, the chances are you're in trouble, because the queen will have started laying probably in January, certainly in February, and by March, April, when you're looking at frames in the hive, you really would expect to see some sealed brood, and sealed brood stands out easily. It's easy to see. If you haven't got any, you probably haven't got a queen, or you've got a dud queen. So